edition of Go Vote Omaha, a candidate forum for the State Board of Education District 8. This is presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Rebecca Armstrong-Langel, and I'm the Vice President for the League of Women Voters in Omaha and the moderator of tonight's forum. The League never supports or opposes political candidates. We present this forum solely for voter education purposes. The format is as follows. Each candidate will get 1 minute opening statement, followed by questions prepared by League members. Each candidate will answer every question and will have up to 90 seconds to answer. The candidate who answers first will be allowed a 30-second rebuttal. Following the questions, each candidate will have a 1 minute closing statement. We alternate speaking order throughout the forum. A timekeeper will signal when they have 30 seconds of time remaining and when to stop speaking. Before the forum, the candidates drew lots in order to determine initial speaking order. I will introduce them now in that order. There are 2 candidates running for the State Board of Education in District 8, and they are Pat McPherson and Deborah Neary. We'll go ahead and start with opening statements. Pat, you are first up.
Hello, I'm Pat McPherson. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity to share with the voters who we are and what we stand for. I love Omaha Public Schools. I'm a product of the Omaha Public School system. I went to Field Club Grade School, Norris Junior High, or now middle school, and Central High School. After that, I graduated from Creighton, and I spent a number of years in the military reserves. I have fought for the last 4 years for equity for every student across the state, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of their religion, regardless of their ability, and regardless of their social or economic status. I hope to continue doing that. Before I came to the board, there was no strategic plan. There was no budget and finance committee. There was no travel policy. I'll be happy to tell you that those now exist, and mainly because of my efforts. I fought for rigorous standards for our math and our social studies, and will continue to fight for rigorous standards on social studies in the fall.
All right, thank you. And now Deborah.
Hi, I'm Deborah Neary, and I am also running for the State Board of Education in District 8. I have been working in education-focused nonprofits for the last 25 years, and also working on studying policy issues for nearly the same length of time. In my professional life, I've led nonprofit businesses with multi-million-dollar budgets. And in my personal life, my husband and I have helped raise 8 foster youth. I also help take care of a sister with a developmental disability, and I serve on several boards that focus on educational supports for our most vulnerable youth. The most important thing that I want people to know about me is that I have a passion for collaboration, inclusiveness, and innovation. And my approach to serving on the State Board of Education will always strive to put teachers and students at the center of my discussions. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to our questions. This first question will start with Deborah.
Okay.
What are the top issues that schools are facing?
You know, it changes daily. If I would have answered this question in March, I would have said school safety. But I think the one thing that doesn't change is closing our achievement gaps across the state. And I like the fact that ESSA, the new plan that has been approved, that we do focus on equity issues. And I do think that there are a lot of equity issues at the heart of our achievement gaps. We need to understand our learners and provide innovative ideas and current day solutions to these. I just think about how much my own office has changed in the last 20 years and how it's been improved by millennials. And I think, we can't be looking at our school systems in the same way we were 20 years ago. Things have changed so much. I believe that 5 out of every 10 children are children of color, and we do need to look at our systems and if we have biases or if we don't have all the supports that we need in place. There's just a lot of ways that we need to be thinking about closing our achievement gaps.
All right, and Pat?
And I also agree that we need to work on our achievement gaps in equity. One of the things I did with the State Board of Education and our strategic plan was make sure that we addressed all of those issues in our strategic plan. When we first developed the plan, there were no number guidelines, there was no breakdown of what we were going to do with the various groups. So in other words, you know, there was no, if we had a graduation requirement, it was like 90%. Well, 90% sounds great, but if you look at the disability or the communities, the communities of color, for instance, the graduation rate is much lower than that. I fought for higher standards in those areas as well, because that's where we really got to make our improvements. And we've got to do everything we can, possibly, to assure that every child, regardless of color, regardless of any disability or anything else, gets an equitable opportunity. So I'll continue to fight for that.
All right, and then for our rebuttal, Deborah?
No comment.
All right, so question number 2, this one will go to Pat first. The results of the statewide assessments were recently published, and there seems to have been no improvement in the prevalence of low test scores in certain populations. What will you do specifically as a member of the State Board of Education to improve low test scores?
Well, that concerns me greatly, and I made some strong comments about that to a number of folks at the time that those scores came out. You know, there are different solutions, and there are new solutions, I believe. One of the things that we have really worked very hard on is our new Reading Act that we passed in the spring. We're no longer going to wait till we find a child in 3rd grade that can't read. We've now got a tough state law, and I supported adding a new staff member to the Department of Education to work with schools on this law, where we're going to start evaluating these children and their reading abilities from kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and we're going to offer opportunities for those children to get the additional education they need, the additional assistance that they need. We can no longer just continue to just sit there and wait till they get to 3rd grade and say, oh, they can't read. We've got the same problem with the issue of dyslexia, another one that we have not recognized in the past. I supported the board's efforts to recognize dyslexia and the legislature's efforts to do so. Again, we've got opportunities very early on, and if we're going to solve these achievement problems, we better get cracking right now. Thank you.
All right, and Deborah?
Will you repeat the question?
Yeah,
Thanks.
The results of statewide assessments
Okay.
have shown that there's been no improvements in the prevalence of low test scores in certain communities or populations. What will you specifically do as a member of the State Board of Education to improve these test scores?
Well, I think we need to be listening to what the needs are. We need to, and I've already started to do this. I mean, as a state board member, I have spent time and met with every single superintendent, except one who's still on my list to meet. But I've sat down in their offices and listened to them. I've listened to families, I've listened to students, I've listened to teachers. I can't say the same for my opponent, because when I've met with all the school superintendents, I've learned that my opponent in 4 years has never sat down with any of them that I've talked to, and he isn't listening. We need to be focused on solutions. We need innovation. We need to understand the students that aren't being successful. I've worked in my career with foster youth, generational poverty, 1st and 2nd generation refugees that have come here, special ed students. We have so many students that have language needs. In our public schools in Omaha, over 100 different languages are spoke. But we need to be able to look at these issues and look at what's holding us back. But the first and foremost thing is we need to be out there talking to our constituents, listening to our superintendents, and listening to our teachers and families.
All right, and Pat, I'll give you a chance to rebut.
Yes, I listen to my constituents. I voted against Common Core standards for math and for science, and I'm proud of that. One of the former superintendents said, well, why didn't you contact us? I said, my job is to listen to the parents and do what my constituents are telling me. They were not happy with those standards. And I will listen to them before I'll listen to superintendents, and I'm proud of it.
All right, question number 3. This one goes to you first, Deborah. Nebraska is one of the few states that does not allow charter schools. Do you support charter schools in Nebraska, and why or why not?
So Nebraska, you know, we're different than a lot of other states because of the way our legislation is written. We already allow for open enrollment and we allow for school choice. And I don't think when people talk about charter schools, I don't think they really understand all the flexibility that we have in our legislation for schools and for parent choice. What I support are focus schools that are innovative, but yet under our public school umbrellas so that we still have accountability back to the taxpayers. I also am not for, most of the discussions around charter schools are people that want to privatize our public education. They want to give corporate entities an opportunity to make a profit off our public education. It's like, I'm not for that. I really believe in having a strong public education. I believe that's the future of Nebraska, that we need to have a strong public education. And I don't believe that we should be talking about charters. The language instead for me is around focus schools that are innovative, but under taxpayer, where there's taxpayer accountability and under our public school settings.
Thank you. And Pat?
First of all, the legislature is the organization or the body that's going to determine whether there are charter schools in the state of Nebraska, and they've traditionally stayed away from that. Am I afraid of charter schools? Not. I am not. I believe that competition in education, competition in any business is very important. I'm not afraid of charter schools. I'm not exactly advocating for them. I certainly don't feel very good about for-profit charter schools. But in some states, charter schools have worked very well. In New York City, there's a long waiting list for charter schools. People can't wait long enough, or can't wait to get their kids enrolled in those charter schools. Again, you know, we've got public schools, we got private schools, we got homeschooling. I support all of those. And I'm not afraid of any additional competition. But as I say, it's the legislature that will determine whether there are charter schools, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you.
And Deborah, would you like to rebut?
I would. You know, the last time we debated, you were against charter schools, so I understand that you're changing your opinion again. But we are 49th in the country as far as our public school funding here in Nebraska. We can't afford to experiment and take money away from our public schools, which is what my opponent wants to do. I really believe that we need to strengthen our public schools, and yes, I believe I'm not afraid of charter schools. I'm all for innovation, but I'm talking about having accountability back to our taxpayers.
Thank you. The 4th question, we will start with Pat. The idea of eliminating the State Board of Education was recently floated in the unicameral. Is this an idea worth considering?
No, I don't think it is. There have been some thoughts about that. The State Board of Education performs a myriad number of processes and duties, and to have an individual appointed by the governor or anybody else, I believe, is not appropriate. You know, we have a great system here. We have 8 State Board of Education districts. The voters in each of those districts decide who's going to be their member on the board. They decide who best represents them. And when you have an appointee, if it's a matter of a governor appointing those members over a period of time, he would appoint all those members. They'd think exactly the way that governor thought. And I think that's inappropriate. I think all 8 members of the State Board of Education are very concerned about what they hear from their constituents, what they hear from the parents, what they hear from the teachers and the superintendents, and I would not change that. Thank you.
And Deborah?
You know, if we learned that we weren't relevant anymore, I would certainly be in consideration of getting rid of a State Board of Education. I would not be in favor of having them be political appointees. I think that we already have enough political involvement in our school systems, and this is supposed to be a nonpartisan, non-political office, but it has become politicized. I really believe the whole reason we have boards for our school districts is so that our parents have a voice. That's one of the most important parts of this process. And so the same thing with elected members of our state school board. Not all states have a State Board of Education, but I do like that we do because it does keep our Department of Education accountable back to the taxpayers. And I really believe that our parents, our teachers, our students, our families, they need a voice, and that's what we're supposed to be.
And Pat, would you like a rebuttal?
I would just like to note that there are only about 5 other states in the nation that actually have elected school board members. We're really unique here in Nebraska as far as our state school board, and I would continue to support the method that we have. Thank you.
Great. All right, question number 5, we're going to start with Deborah.
Okay.
What is the role of the State Board of Education in ensuring safety of students and teachers in our schools?
Oh, wow, this has been a hot topic ever since the Parkland, Florida shooting. And, you know, I've talked to student groups, and I sit on a school board, and I've talked with all the school superintendents, and I've talked to many teachers. And there's a lot of fear out there, and rightfully so. And I've talked to parents that want metal detectors. And of course, we've heard in the news that we have elected officials that want to give all teachers guns. And I do just add a little lighthearted note here. I heard a comedian make the comment that, yeah, we should give teachers all guns. That way they can sell them and buy school supplies. And that's kind of where my brain is. It's how do we pay for these solutions? You know, given our limited budgets already, that we aren't paying teachers enough, teachers don't have what they need to run efficiently. And so how can we keep our schools safe? We can do it with preparedness and prevention strategies. And a large part of our prevention needs to be looking at the mental health supports that we have for students that have trauma, toxic stress. How can we help these students so that these incidents aren't happening years later?
And Pat?
We do need to provide more mental health professionals, more psychologists, and more social workers in our schools. And we do need more preparedness. In Nebraska City recently, in the spring, there was an event, and we found out afterwards that neither the sheriff's department nor the state patrol had been in that school or had any contact with that school. There's something wrong there. We've got to do a better job there. Last week, you know, and safety goes to many aspects. Last week, there was a person came to me and said a school bus was going 80 miles an hour down the highway. What should I do? I said, you call that school board and you let them know that they were endangering the safety of their children. Just today, a state legislator came to me at a meeting and said, you know, we got to do something about our games and our lighting issue. And he was talking about a small school district. And I said, well, Nebraska Sports Association normally would handle that. Well, they haven't handled that. And he's got a game being called when there's lightning within a mile or two, not when it's within 6 miles away. So we've got some safety issues that go way beyond what we just think of on a typical basis. We've got to make our schools safer. We've got some great opportunities to do that. We need more money to do that. We've got a state a state policy that is going into the schools to do that.
Great. And Deborah, would you like to rebut?
No, I've been really pleased with the Department of Education and again how proactive they've been in rolling out preparedness measures for schools and training schools on how to respond, and also in initiating conversations so that these conversations with law enforcement and all the different entities that need to be taking place, our NDE has been proactive and I've been very impressed.
So for this question, we're going to start with Pat. Why did you want to run for the State Board of Education?
I believe that I can make a difference. Unlike the other members of the board that basically come out of the education establishment, I have a background of banking, a background of management. Like Deb, I've served in numerous community organizations, community health charities in Nebraska, community or American Diabetes Association on local and national boards. I've served on the Nebraska Foster Care, or Douglas County Foster Care Committee. I've worked with Explorer Scout Career Awareness. But I do believe that I bring a different aspect. I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to say, why are we doing this? Why have we been doing this? Look at accreditation. We have 244 school districts in this state, and I ask the question, are any on probation? No, not one of them. Now, what kind of organization is it where you don't have somebody that needs some help? I brought up a concern when we went to establish our priority school for Schuyler High School. I looked at that plan, and it wasn't a plan. I could have put any high school in the state on that plan. It had no numbers, nothing to reflect graduation rates, improvement of scores, or even absenteeism. Those are the reasons that we need someone on this board that can ask those kind of questions.
And Deb?
You know, my lifelong passion has been about advocating for children, both my husband and I, you know, being foster care parents, being on school boards, advocating for youth all over our community, and helping take care of my nieces and nephews who, you know, happen to be among some of the brightest and best students in their schools. And so because of my work with so many different demographics in our community, it's like I want everyone to be successful, and I want us to have a skilled workforce so that our economy is going to be strong. But the other part of the reason I'm running is I'm tired of the politics that are in our, you know, making decisions about our education policy. I have right here a fundraising letter that my opponent set out, where he actually is saying that if you don't vote for him, that I'm going to allow boys and girls to take showers together. This is the kind of political fear, the kind of stuff that is so inappropriate. I don't want partisan politics taking and making decisions for our education systems.
Okay. Sorry
Thank you.
to cut you off.
Do I get a rebut?
Yes, Pat, you get a rebut.
Yeah. Let's be clear. My opponent is going to be another rubber stamp for the Nebraska Education Association. She'll be the 8th vote. They don't want any dissent on that board. My opponent does not support local control. She supported the comprehensive sex education program of the OPS. If she had her way and the NSEA had their way, they would support one size fits all. They'd have a comprehensive OPS, Planned Parenthood sex education program for every school district in Nebraska.
Okay, and we are moving to closing statements now, so please finish up whatever you'd want to say, and we will start with Pat.
I thought
No, sorry, we didn't get to the last question, sorry. You are right, we are starting with Deborah.
Okay. Is it closing statement
Yeah,
time?
closing statements.
Okay. I want to rebut what was just said. This gentleman has said statements about me that he has no way of knowing. What was the first thing that you said? That these ideas, that I wasn't for local control. Oh my goodness, I've always been for local school control. I'm very conservative in the way I look at our education policies, and I really believe in that we need to be the middle of the road and not playing these partisan politics that he's sending out, that Mr. McPherson has said that, you know, he's sad that he's the only conservative voter. I want to speak for all students, not just for a few conservative voters. I believe I have the skills, the know-how, and I hope people will visit my website at debneary.com to learn more. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just gonna ask if we can just stick to your views, and sorry, but
Okay.
if we can do that, and Pat, it's your turn now.
Well, again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for generously giving us this time. I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. You have a choice between my opponent, a fine, well-meaning person who will assure the educate or will basically support the education establishment, or be an eighth voice for them on the board, or a candidate that will fight for equitable education for every student, who will not be afraid to ask the questions that need to be asked to hold our schools and our administrators accountable, who will not be afraid to fight for the taxpayer. I'm the only one that ever used the term fiduciary responsibility. We have an obligation on the State Board of Education not only to provide the greatest equitable education for every student, but to also be a watchdog for the citizen of the state of Nebraska and mind their politics and their taxes and their taxes and their taxes. Thank you.
And this concludes our forum for the State Board of Education District 8. Thank you so much, Deborah and Pat, for coming and joining us today. And for the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm Rebecca Armstrong-Langle, reminding you to inform yourself about the issues and the candidates, and go vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 6th. Go vote, Omaha.